3, why U.S. feared Soviet nuclear missile attack from space after secret rocket launch. The U.S. was seriously concerned over the possibility of the Soviet Union dropping a nuclear weapon from space after the communist state launched an artificial Earth satellite. The Cold War was a period of tension between the Eastern Bloc, spearheaded by the Soviet Union, and the Western Bloc, headed up by the U.S. It gained its title because there was no large-scale fighting directly between the two sides, but they each supported major regional conflicts known as proxy wars, and the two superpowers constantly jockeyed for supremacy in the space race and the arms race. There were several tense moments between 1946 and 1991, where the possibility of a nuclear attack looked more than possible from both nations. These fears were born out of World War II, when U.S. President Harry Truman kept a secret from Joseph Stalin about the true force of his nuclear weapons that were later dropped on Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Many believe these fears reached their peak during the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, when the U.S. discovered Soviet ballistic missiles in Cuba. However, there was a brief spell of panic 5 years earlier, when all the U.S. could do was sit and hope they would not be obliterated by a nuclear bomb from space. On October 4, 1957, under First Secretary Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, the first man-made satellite into space. The low-orbit craft orbited Earth for 3 weeks before its batteries died, then silently for 2 more months before falling back into the atmosphere. Every day for those 3 months, U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower hoped the satellite would return. Eisenhower was terrified of Soviet might and the advances they had made over the last few years. The launch and orbit of Sputnik 1 suggested that the USSR had made a substantial leap forward in technology, which was interpreted as a serious threat to U.S. national security. The USSR used intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBM, technology to launch Sputnik into space. This gave the Soviets 2 propaganda advantages over the U.S. at once. They could send the satellite into orbit and they had proof of the distance capabilities of these missiles. The Americans feared that the Soviets had rockets capable of sending nuclear weapons from Russia into space, to rain down on Western Europe and even North America. The U.S., a land with a history of geographical security away from European wars, suddenly seemed vulnerable. In addition, the Soviets had not released a photograph of the satellite for 5 days after the launch, so U.S. scientists were completely in the dark. Another factor was Sputnik's weight of 83 kilograms, compared to U.S. plans to launch a satellite of 10 kilograms. This sparked panic among Western governments as to what more the satellite could be capable of and what it could be holding. 5 days after the launch of Sputnik, Eisenhower addressed the American people, shutting down claims safety was breached. In response, Eisenhower said, "Now, so far as the satellite itself is concerned, that does not raise my apprehensions, not one iota." Eisenhower believed that Sputnik's weight was not commensurate with anything of great military significance, and that was also a factor in putting it in proper perspective. Despite this, he followed the statement by revealing the U.S. would match the achievement with resourcefulness and vigor. As a result, in February 1958, Eisenhower authorized the formation of the Advanced Research Projects Agency, later renamed the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, within the Department of Defense, DoD, to develop emerging technologies for the U.S. military. He then signed the National Aeronautics and Space Act 5 months later, marking the creation of NASA, and the space race was born. The Sputnik crisis sparked the U.S. drive to retake the lead in space exploration from the Soviets and fueled its drive to land men on the moon, a decade-long goal set by John F. Kennedy when he came into power in 1961. On July 20, 1969, Commander Neil Armstrong and lunar module pilot Buzz Aldrin successfully landed the Apollo lunar module Eagle, with the former becoming the first man to step on the Moon. Armstrong's first step onto the lunar surface was broadcast on live TV to a worldwide audience. He described the event as one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. The Apollo 11 mission effectively ended the space race and the peace movement grew through to the 80s.